Mind is rated R. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is also rated R. We're going to spend this time discussing the movie in gory detail, and along the road we will talk about some adult content and use some of our favorite swear words.
Caramello contrasti.
Consider yourselves warned.
Welcome to Rocky Horror Minute, the podcast where we discuss the Rocky Horror Picture Show in excruciating detail, 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Leandra.
And today we have a banger of a minute for you. It's minute 81.
Woohoo!
It's not boring. Lots happens in it. Yeah, let's hear about it, Leandra.
You said lots happens in it?
Tons, I would say. I would argue this has so much packed into it that I don't know how we're going to cover it all.
Yeah, I mean, ignore the fact that this podcast so often starts at, we're not going to talk for very long, and then 3 hours later we're still talking about the same minute. I genuinely think, though, that this episode isn't going to be a very long one. And listeners, you know more than I do at this moment how long this episode is, so either I'm right or I'm wrong.
It really just depends on if you get me started on Animorphs again, but I did just finish the David trilogy in my reread, so I have a lot to say. Yeah.
Well, let's save that one just for some other minute where we don't have so much to talk about.
That's fair, yeah. We are really crunched for time.
Yeah. But this is minute 81, and despite what we've just said, I genuinely think that not a lot happens, but what does happen is beautiful. We return to Frank, who ended last minute beginning to describe Fay Ray as that delicate. He completes the description as satin draped frame. He continues, as it clung to her thigh, how I started to cry, 'cause I wanted to be dressed just the same. Give yourself over to absolute pleasure. Swim the warm waters of sins of the flesh. Erotic nightmares beyond any measure, and sensual daydreams to treasure forever. As he's saying this, he kicks a lever which slowly reveals a set of steps. As he walks down the steps, he unfurls his taxidermied 14-headed Furby, or whatever the fuck it is that we think it is this week, and he stops and sways, singing, "Can't you just see it?" And that is how this minute ends.
Great minute. I don't know if I can't remember if we talked about it last minute, but the fishnets are really tore up by now, especially in the knees.
Gosh, I wonder what happened to his knees to make them so torn up.
Yeah, it's impossible to fathom as somebody who has also worn the knees out of a lot of pants and tights and such. I was thinking about this set that Frank has in his castle. It's actually really quite elaborate for the level of operation they have going on. Do you have thoughts on who built this?
In universe?
Yes.
I feel like Frank probably is one of those people who has an idea and writes it on a napkin and then goes, "I need you to build this for me." And he handed it over to Riff Raff, who wanted so much for this to not be his job, but it was. And I assume that Riff did all of the work of constructing it, but I don't know. Either they had Columbia or somebody come in and do the painting, or maybe it was all of the Transylvanians came in a day early and had a tech week for their party. It's a good question.
Well, whoever did it, it's professional quality stuff.
Oh yeah, A+.
We also got a chance to see Frank's nipples in great detail in this minute.
Woohoo!
But seriously, yeah, we got to see his little. He really puts them on display. It's like a little Nell all over again when he's spreading his boa. I mean,
yeah. So one thing that I noticed, at least in this lighting, as he was walking down the steps, you really see how red the shoes are that he's wearing. We've spoken about this before, but you see so many of the gems just reflecting the light super well at this moment. And unfortunately, I just don't have another set of shoes to switch into, although I'm considering getting more for Frank, just because It really is iconic.
Yeah.
I really only have one more note. It's that pledge or that thing that Frank sings, the give yourself over to absolute pleasure. I know of a couple of casts that have like different joining rituals, or if it's like a college cast, it's like hazing, that sort of thing. And they use that as the you're a Rocky fan, prove it. Recite that part. I think that it is a very fun thing to make people memorize in order to prove that they're a die-hard Rocky fan. Obviously, that's not something that our cast would ever do, but I do appreciate that there is a level of cultiness that you get in forcing people to memorize that.
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, how much of it?
All of it. The give yourself over to absolute pleasure and swim the warm waters of sins of the flesh, erotic nightmares beyond any measure, and sensual daydreams to treasure forever. Can't you just see it?
That's not that much.
Yeah, but imagine you're like a little freshman in college and you've just joined this cast and you're like going through the goofy little hazing that is entailed with that and you have to do that. I feel like
I mean,
that would be so stressful.
if I'm me, that would not have been a problem because I watched the movie and especially listened to my CD of the soundtrack like a million times. There was not one lyric that I wouldn't have been able to recite by the time I was a freshman in college. But I suppose if that were not the case for me and I didn't have advanced warning, yeah, that would be stressful.
I mean, even just now when you were like, how much of it? I still like it's not that I stumbled, I was just kind of like, on the spot. So if you're at all stressed or anxious, then I can see that being like a performance anxiety thing.
That's fair.
Listeners, if you had to go through some amount of hazing to join your first cast, please let us know in the form of a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Actually, listening to this podcast, our hazing ritual is that you have to leave us a 5-star review. So, if you haven't done that already, you risk getting kicked off of the listener base. You better hurry.
But it's cute when we haze, right?
Well, yeah. Listen, I'm not spanking anybody.
Oh, okay.
Gotta do more than listen to my podcast for that. The only other thing I have is I wanted to comment on the lyrics. First of all, they're kind of unusual lyrics in this movie because there's like more of a sincerity to it than we usually get. They're like the kind of classic queer experience of like getting obsessed with a woman in a movie and like as a child and wanting to dress like her. And then also I don't think, I've been trying to remember, but I don't think we get any explicit specific references to movies like that in any other songs besides science fiction double feature, obviously. But like in character songs, I was struggling to think of any direct references like that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's sort of unique in that way.
It really is, and it's very fun that it's that specific reference.
Yeah, Richard O'Brien really had a thing for King Kong.
And incest.
Well, yes. Incest and bestiality together at last.
Name a more iconic duo.
And then Richard O'Brien's like, me and my sister.
Then a redhead and a twink.
That's all I had, though.
All right, let's go on to callbacks.
So when he says satin draped frame, you can respond, it was polyester, I know my fabrics, and I will often hear someone respond to me by saying fabric whore when I say that. When he says I wanted to be dressed just the same, there's a lot of things you can say over it. My favorite is just to say I wanted to be dressed by Sue Blaine. Sue Blaine, of course, being the costumer, and she's to blame. Before he says beyond any measure, you can say, how big's your dick? Beyond any measure. And then before he says, can't you just see it? You can say, can I touch your penis? Can't you just see it? But that's really it, at least in terms, there's some that I don't like and I'm choosing not to say. So, yeah.
That's fair. So, starting off, the fabric one, the delicate satin draped frame, I've always heard it as it was taffeta, I know my fabrics. Although one night, somebody in the audience said polyester is the fiber and taffeta and satin are both types of weaved fabric. You're both right. And I think about that all the time. And it's true. It's just pedantic and I hate it. But it just, in the back of my head, if I can think about it and like get all of the words straight, I always am tempted to say that as well. Because it is something that makes you scratch your head and go, yeah, I guess that is true. And then as it clung to her thigh, my personal favorite is like a misplaced maxi pad. I'm not saying that it's good, but the other option is like a homesick abortion, which I think is just like gross and rude and honestly like not funny.
To me, it's very like early 2000s dead baby humor type of thing,
Yeah.
which is to say, not funny and like cringe to me, but yeah.
And there are plenty of things out there that have aged well and are still funny, or at least cringe in a way that makes everybody smile with you. But I've never once heard people happy to hear that callback. The most that I get is a kind of, really? At least at our show.
Yeah, sometimes you get like somebody like, "Whoa, can they really say that?" type of reaction, but yeah, I mean for the most part it's just kind of it's shock value humor, right?
Yeah, and believe me, I get it. I think that shock value humor does have a place. I just don't think that that is particularly my cup of tea. Moving on though, how I started, and then there's this ellipse. I say in that to laugh, and then Frank says to cry, and I go, oh. And because I wanted to be dressed, I like saying like a chicken. It just makes me giggle. Another one is just the same. When he says just the same, you can say you already are, implying that Fay Ray is dressed like Frankenfurter. And then the only other one that I have is what do you say to make fun of Stevie Wonder? And the response to that is can't you just see it?
Okay.
And, it's fun. But that's all I have.
That's all I have. Get the fuck out of my house.
I'm not in your house, you're in my house.
Oh shit.
No,
Then who's
you don't
driving the car? I don't have to
go home, but you can't stay here, so get the fuck out.
To the late night double feature picture show.
Areola, stick 'em out. Don't know what I'm talking about. That circle around the skittle in the middle you put in your mouth. But I love you, baby. Hell no. Titties, if they're big or small, it's what I'm talking about. Now turn around and pull 'em out your bra. I could do this all day.